people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
And now it's time for what is fast becoming one of the preferred segments here on the Relay, Ring IQ Hate Mail, where I read through the disgruntled comments of disgruntled customers that have a bone to pick with me. Yeah, one guy asked if I actually casted a vote for Donnie J, to which my old buddy, Dodgers and Lakers, said yes, he voted for him, and said numerous times it is what it is regarding non-criminal immigrants getting deported.
Buddy, if you entered into the country illegally, that makes you a criminal because you broke the law in doing so.
Apparently he had an old friend at work who was nice and he got deported, so, oh well?
Yeah, he did, but that was close to 20 years ago. Tell the whole story, why don't you? That didn't just happen.
It's really infantile logic. I stopped watching when he started forcing his politics onto the content.
If you'd stopped watching as soon as I started talking about politics, you wouldn't be in the comment section now, watching that video. So what kind of logic is that? Seems pretty infantile to me to be as disingenuous as you are, but that's what liberals often are in debates and discussions. Disingenuous, which is why they lost the election.
And I love how none of these disgruntled customers took the time out to address all the talking points I raised in my video, because like liberals often do,
They skirt around the truth. They skirt around the facts.
Guy who goes by the name Michael Castaneda said, new-assed panhandling.
What is, making videos about boxing?
Yes, countries do have borders. Go back to the Dominican Republic.
Why would I do that? I was born here. Oh, you thought I had that problem.
I don't. Neither did my parents because, well, they didn't come here illegally, so that's not something I have to worry about. They went through the proper channels, which is all anybody is asking for. It's not like the country's saying nobody can get in, but there's a process and you have to go through it.
No, you don't see it that way because what you're advocating for is lawlessness. The same lawlessness that many of these migrants claim to be running from. You want to bring that here.
What you're going to do is get all bent out of shape that a sovereign nation is securing its own border. Well, what do you expect it to do? Even worse is that on many occasions I've said, what screwed it up for everybody, what really exacerbated things, was the moment that Americans started reading their newspapers and seeing that Venezuelan street gangs are setting up shop in cities across America.
Biden's not doing nothing about it.
Biden's the one that let him in. That was likely the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't actually think it was the Mexican migrants that got us here. I think it was the Venezuelan ones, but one way or another, here we are. Goose 1207 said, boxing takes are on point, political takes, absolute garbage though.
If that were true, I wouldn't have been able to forecast this past election.
Like I forecast, so many of the boxing matches we all watch, I knew. Yeah, the Dems aren't going to win this one. With all their kooky ideas, good friend of the channel, The Gooch, said, this episode of Ring IQ was sponsored by Fox, so-called news.
So don't stop me when I tell a lie, Gooch. Point it out.
COYG said this take is 90% malarkey. One of the few I disagree with you on, Jules. Pose for Trump is a cult.
Maybe it is. I'm not the biggest fan of that guy, but I liked his policies a bit more than the other side's.
Keeping boys out of girls' sports and not using municipal tax dollars to pay for sex changes.
What?
In case you haven't noticed, the last 4 years, every major city in America has been suffering from a bad case of tooth decay.
On Sleepy Joe's watch.
Good buddy Pablo Bergon said, Latinos for Trump are also being deported. Do you feel sorry for these people?
Not really.
I don't. I hope they have the day that they voted for. Well, how would they have voted for it if they were deported for being illegal aliens? Make it make sense, Pablo.
Liberals often can't, which is why I say time and time again, for all of their altruism, they offer very little in terms of real-world answers and real-world solutions. It's all just feelings.
Alberto Hernandez said, damn IQ, you're so stupid with this comment. Stick to boxing, that's the reason we watch your videos, or at least I do. I don't need to waste my time with your stupidity, as your president says.
Well, buddy, A well-known boxer in Julio Cesar Chavez got picked up by ICE. There's no way I can address that without addressing the politics.
More liberal logic.
The same way that I can't address Ryan Garcia's comments about supporting Donnie J while not supporting migrant deportations without addressing the politics. It's about the politics.
The entire conversation is rooted in politics, and it's entered the boxing sphere. The moment a well-known boxer gets deported for having an expired visa and a warrant for his arrest south of the border, how do you want me to package that?
What I like in this entire situation, too, is having a relaxed shift supervisor that understands entry-level employees are not going to break their back for peanuts on a dollar, so he lets them take it easy.
And they do.
That's what I like in the last 4 years, too. But then comes along one employee, one bad apple, that goes a bit too far and ruins it for everybody.
Let's call that employee the migrant street gangs that cross the border. The Venezuelan ones that were setting up shop in major cities across America, New York, Aurora, Colorado. I heard that they had expanded to Houston, Texas.
El tren de agua.
Two Americans became worried about reading through their newspapers about the border crisis and this open border policy. That's why they voted the way that they did. That's what messed it up for everybody.
I don't blame the Mexican migrants. I blame the Venezuelan ones.
In tandem with this country having as many international enemies as it does, just itching to get in here and do some damage, securing the border is a top priority.
That's common sense. That's the reason you lock your doors at night when you go to bed.
Though I know in saying this that most of it is going to fall on deaf ears because you're emotionally compromised. And I'm not. It's just a matter of common sense. If the approach now is so aggressive and extreme, it's because of the last 4 years.
I expect that at some point it'll die down.
Illegal immigration is never going to go away, in my opinion. Because to some extent, there are a lot of good people out there that actually come here illegally, but still contribute to this country's infrastructure and economy. But the Democrats made such a mess of everything the last 4 years.
Guys on the other side are rushing with their mops and buckets to clean it up. And this is the collateral damage, unfortunately. That is the most sincere and adult perspective that I can give you. It was all fun in the sun, tits and tan lines, until Americans woke up reading about Venezuelan street gangs commandeering entire buildings and neighborhoods.
Top of all the other crap.
Maybe I should start a political channel, because if the Democratic Party expects to win any other election, they've got to realign their perspectives to be more in line with the American public and what benefits them, not what benefits a bunch of other people from someplace else.
Not just when it comes to this either, it's also when it comes to the war in Ukraine, as well as the conflict between Israel and Iran.
Applies to a lot of things, not just one.
But if any of this stuff bothers you, guess what? You don't have to come here, and you don't have to watch this. Won't be seeing ya!
¿Entiendes? Porque sabemos de la inocencia de mi hijo, ¿me entiendes? Que conoce a mucha gente que anda en esas cosas, pues sí, vive en Culiacán, vivimos en Culiacán, ¿me entiendes? Entonces sería imposible no conocer a toda esa gente que andan en esas cosas ilícitas, ¿me entiendes? Pero eso no indica nada, ¿me entiendes? No indica nada. Yo también en mi tiempo pues conocí a todo el mundo, ¿me entiendes? Y
Chavez Sr. asserts that Jr. is innocent, and they're just going after him due to what are inevitable associations based on where they live. That where they live, you're bound to know somebody that's doing something nefarious. But what Jr. is being accused of is a little bit more than just knowing a guy that knows a guy. The stuff that's coming from out of south of the border, what he's being accused of.
It's heavy stuff, man.
And bear in mind that all of this predates his detainment by ICE. The warrant out for his arrest is from 2 years ago.
Story recently published by Morelia.com.
Chavez Jr., the former world champion, was described as a minion in the service of Nestor Ernesto Perez Salas, alias the Nini, one of the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, according to an investigation by the Attorney General's office revealed this Friday by the newspaper Reforma. The accusation indicates that Chavez Jr., 39, would have been used to punish subordinates of the cartel in one of the calls made by the FGR between December 2021 and June 2022. It is related to how El Nini ordered to tie up and hang a member of the criminal group so that the boxer would hit him as a punching bag.
So he was an enforcer.
The evidence presented includes telephone interceptions and immigration records shared by U.S. agencies. The investigation also goes back to a complaint filed since November of 2019 by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Service, ICE, and the Office of Homeland Security Investigations related to arms trafficking. Chavez Jr. was arrested last Thursday in the United States and will be deported to Mexico. His arrest responds to both the alleged relationship with organized crime and to his irregular immigration status. The boxer legally entered the United States in August of 2023 with a visa that expired in February of last year. He later applied for permanent residence, arguing that he was married to an American citizen who is also linked to the Sinaloa cartel due to a previous relationship with a son of El Chapo Guzman. Although in December of 2024, the authorities considered him a serious threat to public safety, he was not arrested at that time. However, after multiple fraudulent statements in his residence application, it was decided to start his deportation process.
The arrest came days after Chavez Jr. lost the fight against YouTuber Jake Paul in Anaheim, California. Now, some question the time of the arrest, that if all of this was going on, why did they wait good up until he fights Jake Paul to apprehend him?
And it's a valid question to ask. The timing is impeccable, but the timing of the arrest doesn't invalidate the investigation.
The associations made between Chavez and certain nefarious characters operating south of the border, which is a bit more than what his father suggested, that, where they live, you're bound to know a guy that knows a guy. It would seem that Junior knows a little more than just a guy.
He's one of the guys.
I feel for Senior during this trying time, and the massive disappointment that Junior has turned out to be.
The apple fell quite far from the tree when it comes to Junior, but he was a child born of privilege. By the time he comes into the world, his father is a Mexican icon, a Mexican legend. Julio knows very little about hard work,
discipline,
using it to get at the things that you want in life. By the time Junior's born, he doesn't have to do any of that because he's rich. And the burden that most Nepo babies face, living in the shadow of their more famous forebears, their more famous fathers, just trying to live up to that legacy. Well, Junior was never going to do that.
Lacking a sense of self, that you're not the chip off the old block your old man wants you to be.
Lacking a sense of self to the point where you fall in with the wrong crowd, start doing all the wrong things, and here we are, 39 years old.
People were actually going up to bat for Chavez, saying that he was unfairly targeted by ICE and their prejudicial practices.
When there's a whole investigation on this guy on both sides of the border in connection with the Sinaloa cartel. Surely you could see how beneficial it might be to that cartel to have a public figure like a Chavez Jr. regularly traveling to both sides of the border. He'll always have the perfect alibi that he's in America on business, that he's in Mexico on business.
Outwardly, who's gonna suspect him of anything? He's a bumbling idiot.
Able to move seamlessly from one side of the border to the other unnoticed. Well, that was up until the phone tap in 2021, I think it was.
So now what do? He's gonna be extradited to Mexico if he hasn't already, to serve out his time there if he does end up doing time. And because he's a well-known athlete, a public figure, they might want to make an example out of him, send a message.
If his buddies in Sinaloa can't get him out of this jam.
Can they?
This ties together so many themes. Boxing, organized crime, politics.
They've always had some sort of a relationship with this sport, haven't they?
Whether it's Daniel Kinahan hiding out in Dubai or the Sinaloa cartel, organized crime and boxing have always had a symbiotic relationship.
Downstairs at light heavyweight, Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev choose Russia. Here's why.
Why Russia? The fight in Russia could earn them even more money. With reports the organizers have promised the two lucrative paydays for the trilogy fight, there is also a large domestic fight on offer. Bivol, Kyrgyz Russian, and Beterbiev, Chechen Russian, have strong ties to Russia. With Russian promoters and the government, they might be willing to invest heavily to host such a significant event on home soil. The pair also have the chance to secure a home crowd for their side. The Saudis have been criticized for the lack of atmosphere, with many of the events being attended by big celebrities who may not be the most ardent of boxing fans. Given how close the first two fights were, a home crowd could prove decisive. And with the pair having achieved everything at light heavyweight, this would be another milestone to cap things off. Regardless, Beterbiev wants it to happen as soon as possible, and at 40 years old, who could blame him? But we've already been all through that. The question is, if the fight does happen in Russia, who does it favor? Who benefits from that? Dmitry? Artur?
I think Artur benefits from that. Let's not kid ourselves. They're a lot more lax when it comes to anti-doping testing in Russia than in other parts of the world. And I do think that Artur is doping because I think most of the sport is doping.
That includes your favorite fighter and mine.
Do you remember when Artur Beterbiev tested positive for elevated levels of testosterone? He didn't get popped for a synthetic drug or anything like that, but his T levels were a bit higher than usual.
Having grown cynical over time, watching anyone from Tyson Fury to Canelo Alvarez to Oscar Valdez to Alicia Baumgartner, Jarrell Miller about 1,000,000 times.
Big hungry.
Now, I'm far too cynical to ignore that, at least on one occasion, Artur Beterbiev turned in an interesting anti-doping test. At this point, I think everybody's doping, they're just not all on the same stuff for the same reason. Different fighters have different needs, so they use different gear. And I'm actually alright with that, because when you think about it, if everybody's doping...
Is it really cheating?
As a concept, you use gear to gain a competitive edge, to get a leg up on the other guy. But if the other guy's doping too, which one is the cheater among the two of you?
Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I think that the fight happening in Russia, where testing is a lot more lax, might actually favor Artur a bit more than it favors Dmitry.
It might, in theory. And I do like the idea that some financier or financiers would do more to bring big-time boxing to that region of the world, as so often the fighters in that region have to come to the West, this part of the world, just to get screwed on the cards, like Vasyl Lomachenko did in the Devin Haney fight, like some would say Sergey Kovalev did in the first Andre Ward fight.
Eastern European fighters often come to America just to get screwed.
But boxing is changing, and boxing is more a global sport now than it ever was in previous eras of boxing, to where if there's a big-time promotion forming in Russia, I'm not against it. I'm actually all for it. Another major player, a competitive market, is a healthy market.
Look at the big boxing boom in Japan, the big boxing boom in Britain, the big boxing boom in Australia.
America does not monopolize all of the boxing and the boxing scene anymore, and that's actually a good thing, expanding the sport's global profile.
I'm all for it.